Well, thanks for joining us again at Nomad PDU. Today we're just going to do an out-of-the-box talk about the Nomad PDU and then to cover off, is this something that's suitable for your application or what you're thinking of using it for? The first thing I want to talk about the Nomad PDU is these are not battery boxes. A lot of people think it's just a box and nothing inside. They actually do have a lithium 100 amp hour unit inside, and the cathode or the lithium is NMC. A lot of people will say, oh, should the charge to 13 or 14, 15, 16 volt. NMC, these ones here will charge fully at 12.6, okay, and then run down to 8.8 with an 80% DOD. I'm going to pull out of the box in a moment, but from an application perspective, a lot of people get confused and will say, look, I want to run my induction oven, I want to run my coffee machines, I want to run my plasma gun, I want to run my air compressor, I want to run my winch. They have very massive drawers. They could be anywhere upwards of 2.5, 3 to 5,000 watt. And that's about, you're looking at around about 200 amp, around that point. The Nomads themselves have a 20 amp maximum output at any given time across the entire unit. So if you want to run your coffee machines, induction ovens and things like that, what you're looking for is, if you're going to not use a generator and you want a battery solution, you need to look at multiple batteries running serial, okay, the voltage up, running yourself a large BMS system and large inverters to get the power and the voltage to where you need it, 240, for those types of things. These are simply made for plug and play or plug and go, pick and go. So out of the box, they come out like this. They've got foam inserts on either side of them, which are quite handy for transporting, and that's the way we transport them. So if you want to put them in a vehicle and without having to go to the extent of putting a bracket and some fancy install, you can just put this up against something, then put an Oggy strap around it. Works perfectly fine. In fact, a lot of people still do it. In fact, I've seen people leave it in their box and cut a hole in it and make do with something like that. Then you can take it from car to car or from boat to car. So again, things like boating where you've got electronic fishing reels, that's quite common these days, believe it or not. And we run full fishing reels off these, electric fishing reels, Shimano reels off that, and it works fine. As long as you don't exceed the output. So I'll take the inserts off and we'll have a look at the unit. The first thing you notice is it's light, so it's 11 kilograms. It just means that if you want something that's easy to move around and you don't want to be locked as a power source to one vehicle, this enables you to pull it out of multiple vehicles. So you may have a bracket set up, like we've got over here, and we'll talk about the accessories soon, but you can have a bracket in each vehicle and just pop it in and out, or like the boat, so you bring your Land Cruiser down with your boat on it, take it out of the cruiser and put it in your boat, and that's what a lot of people are doing with these. So let's have a look at the unit. So you do have your cigarette sockets and an angle dedicated, and these are 10 amp outputs maximum. Over here you've got a dual USB output there for your phones and so on. You do have two 5 amp outputs. These are actually rated at, I said 5 amp. They're audio jacks or CCTV, but you can actually run, if you've got a good 2.1 plug, you can run things like, you could run a fridge, but they're designed for your lighting. So I've got strip lighting at the moment, which you'd use up a cigar socket, but just for strip lighting, you're better off just using these little 2.1 ports. Those little port jacks are readily available with someone like J-Car, and that's all you want, red and black. Screw it in, then pop it into these here. Do be careful though, you can short circuit if you're touching these and playing around with them with the screwdriver and things like that. So your 10 amp output across all of these cigar sockets, an angle, and then you have a 20 amp Anderson output. Now we put the Anderson in there for people and their fridges, and specifically why I put them in the V5, which is what this version is. So that's a 20 amp output, and you could run a Y lead and run 2 fridges. Now, if you want to ask us about extreme output, so you might want to run say 50 or 80 or 100 amp. The question we have is, what are you trying to run? And that sounds like it might be commercial application, because we run these in a number of schools, etc., for Cellfire, so running their wireless systems, etc. But the thing is with these is designed for recreational power. 20 amp output will run 2 nice fridges, probably run about 180 litres worth of fridge. So if you've got a 100 litre fridge, you're going to quite happily run that off the Anderson. It won't draw more than 9 amp, 10 amp, even if it's a larger fridge on startup, because it's a DC designed for recreational. So having a 50 amp output, all that means is you're going to be plugging more stuff into it, more chance of doing damage, or more chance of you not knowing really what you're doing. Because a lot of people will give us a call and say, look, the Nomad shut down. And I said, what were you doing? Very common one is they're plugging an air compressor, or they're trying to run a winch. Now, it says very clearly in the instructions, which we do have here, and this is important, there's 8 pages of instructions. If you don't read the instructions, I'll be honest with you, you will run into problems, and we'll get a phone call straight away. And first it'll be, did you read the instructions? And the answer will be, no, I haven't read it. I thought it was straightforward. It's not. You need to read the instructions. You need to follow the loads. Also from the charge capacity, you know how we're going to charge it, which we'll cover in a moment. So 20 amp output for recreational needs, you can run, quite happily, you can run those little buddy ovens and you can run your fridge. And you get, if you wanted to. Or you can run all your lighting and maybe 2 fridges. It works fine. But when you start to run things like compressors, a air compressor, for example, for a 4-wheel drive, or if you're going to use it to try and pump up your air jack, they're going to draw about 80 amp. Very simple. Look at the actual wattage on the actual accessory. What is it going to draw? So you'll also see on here, that's the output green, and you've got your LED display. So you've got a volt monitor here, and you've got an LED screen too. The volt monitor tells you obviously how much volt is in the unit, and this will be 12.6 fully charged. So 12.4 to 12.7 is fully charged. 8.8 is discharged, and that's 80% DoD. So you have 80 physical hours as a minimum of usable power. And we'll talk about what that's important to understand, because when you're looking at fridges, you need to understand that from a fridge perspective. So that's an LED screen volts, and then you've got your LED, for volt, and then for your load. So that will tell you how much amp your accessory is drawing. Just remember, that can never exceed 20 amps. So you can watch that screen going up when you plug things in, they're kicking in and out. You should understand that the way you run your off-gridding system, you should be watching this to understand the amount of draw that whole system is at any given time drawing. And the importance of that is that over a 24-hour period, you'll be able to decide how you're going to charge the Nomad. Do you need solar? How big solar panel do you need? Do you need to have DC-DC charging when you're driving? Or can you get away with just an AC-DC charger? So the unit does come with an AC-DC charger. It's an 8 amp AC-DC charger. Plug it in 240 and charge the unit, and away it goes. The little LED light will come on when it's charging. It'll go off when it's not. So one of the key things with this is, questions we'll get is, this light will go on and off if you're running a fridge. So over an example here, we have a fridge running on this Nomad, as you can see it, but this is running a fridge at the moment. It's sitting on -1 degree, and I don't have a charge on it. But what would happen, because that fridge is at temperature at the moment, it's not actually drawing anything. It's drawing 0.4, 0.03. That's just enough to get the LED on the fridge to work, and now it's just kicked in. So if this was on charge and you're putting 8 amp in and this was drawing, say, 5 amp out, the little red light will be on. But what you'll find is when you're charging it by a solar panel and the efficiency from the solar is quite low, maybe 1 or 2 amp, when that fridge draws, say, 5 amp, the little red light will go off. So it will go on and off. So if there's more going in, as in power going into the unit to charge, than there's going out, then the light will be on. It's still taking power, but if there's 3 amp going in and 5 going out, then that means it's only drawing really 2. So that's the deficit from, the difference between the two. So you've got the opportunity here to charge by the AC-DC, which is a regulated charge, and that's where all the regulated charges go into. So what you have to ask is, am I charging this unit with a regulated power source? The AC-DC charger is regulated because it takes 240 and regulates it to 12.6 and 8 amp. That's what these do. Then if you're going to look at solar panels, which you can run with these, we've got one behind me here, which is a 200 watt solar panel. These have got an ETF-E coating, a Japanese coating on the, these work really well. The size on these are about 1300 by 800 by 4. Now this is an unregulated solar panel behind me. So if you wanted to have a solar panel with the regulator, the maximum charge you can do is 25 amp. So 25 amp maximum charge by a regulated power source. Same with your DC-DCs. We do have a number of Stiga DCs like this, Anderson to DC, and then full DC charging. That's from a vehicle to the Nomad with a regulator between it, which regulates the current, okay, down to 12.6 for the Nomad. If you've got one of these and you connect to the regulated input. So am I charging this with regulated? Here, yes I am. AC-DC, yes I am. If I have a solar panel with a regulator, just make sure that it's regulates it to 25 amp or less and not 1 amp over. So if it's 1 amp over, it will trip the unit out. So what safety mechanisms in place? It does have dead short, reverse polarity and overcharge protection. It also has a memory in there that we will know if you are overcharging it, for example, when you try to bang in, which does happen, somebody uses a DC-DC charger from someone else's car and it's 50 amp. Or it might even be a 25 amp DC-DC, which charges at 26 amp. What will happen is this unit says, I don't like it. I'm not built to take 25 plus amp. I need 25 or less. I'm not going to take a charge. And that protects the unit and says, okay, I'm not going to charge now until you address the issue. So if you overcharge it, what you'll need to do is draw more than 1 amp, and that will allow this to start charging. So the call we'll get is my Nomad doesn't charge anymore. The answer straight away back is, have you overcharged it? And if you say no, look, that's fine, but we'll have to go through troubleshooting. But if you told me what you did, we'd simply be able to reset it over the phone, no issue at all. That reset is in the instructions. The same as a dead short, you'll get a lot of accessories in the market, the Chinese accessories, nothing wrong with it, but the wiring colouring is different, and some people cut connections off and they don't understand what a blue or a brown or a black, red, yellow, what's what. So the thing is, if you get a mistake and you cross it or you're dead short it, then this unit will shut down, it'll go black. All you need to do is take that load off, plug in the power source, and it'll restart again. So that's in place as it is. And reverse polarity, same issue, is that it won't take a charge, it just won't operate on a reverse polarity. So that's regulated by solar, regulated by DC-DC. So if you have a look in store, if you're walking around one of our partners' stores at the moment, you'll be able to look at the range of accessories. They do have 5s, 10s, and 20s, Sigma or Anderson DCs, double fuse, or you can have full DC charging. You can have a look at our website at nomadpdu.com.au and then click on the DC charging options, and you can have a look through each one of those that suits what you want. Most popular by far are the Anderson to DC module to Anderson, or the Sigma DCs, because you can just take it out of any vehicle and move them from car to car. You're not stuck with a dual battery in one vehicle and stuck to the vehicle. So if you want to go fishing with a normal dual battery setup, might weigh 150, 200, you're not going to pull that out of the car. It's not made for portability, where these are made for portability. So 100 amp hour inside, battery is inside, does come with the unit. It's not separate, it's not just a battery box, which a lot of people do get confused with. And like I said, if you are considering these higher end wattage drawers, compressors, plasma guns, and those types of things, you need to look at a different system as opposed to this portability here. What else do you have in the option range? You do have these adapters that you can get, like Y leads. These are great to have. Partners do have them, and you can push this into an output like so. You might run 2 fridges. I know that we run sometimes a 50 litre or 60 litre fridge, and then we run the camping oven on the other one there, and then we've got the rest of these free for lighting or whatever, and that's what we use that for. The other thing you'll notice on here is that we've got this connection that I've set up, and that's another eyelet connection like so, and that's just basically the red and black poles that goes to an Anderson. So that's an unregulated input. So we've talked about regulated charge, and now we've got unregulated input. So this will take up to 10 amp, and the rule of thumb is if you've got a solar panel like I have here, which is one of the preferred panels that we do use, it's a smart home brand, get it through the partners. They're around about 300 retail. We're going to have a solar tutorial at the end of this one, and it'll cover off solar panels and connectivity. So as long as it's under 200 watt, you connect red and black. This has an Mppt controller inside, so it's a good quality one, so you don't need to go to the expense of buying a regulator and then plug it into Nomad. As long as the panel is under 200 watt or 10 amp, look at the back of the unit or the panel. The panel will tell you what its max is, and these will take 8 to 32 volt. So a 24 volt panel, no problem. This one here, an open circuit, is about 24 and a bit, I think 26 volt actually. So that connects in here, no problem. It's under 200 watt or exactly 200 watt. I know that doesn't put out any more, it doesn't charge any more than 10 amp. But these panels, to give you an idea, if you're off-gridding and you have a 50 litre fridge and you set it at say -1 or 2, and it's 30 or 40 degrees, or let's say 40 degrees outside, one of these 200 watt panels will keep that unit topped up all through the day, and at night time when the sun goes down, the unit will be fully charged. It'll be, it might be 12.3 or 12.6, and the sun goes down, obviously not charging. You'll wake up in the morning and your Nomad will probably be at 11.8, 11.9 volt. The solar panel kicks in, and actually like what I've just been doing the last 4 or 5 days, kicks in quite early. By lunchtime it's already fully charged. It's fully charged all the rest of the day, does the same again at night. You can run this 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, never have to worry about it. In fact, that's what I personally do on my farm with my recreational fridges that are there full time. They're running off a sea container. So these ones here, quite happily you can run a 200 watt panel, a fridge, and you can set and forget, and it'll run perfectly fine. So you just have to look at what is it that you want to do. One of the common questions is, how long would it run my fridge? And that's a concerning question, because when someone asks that, a lot of times they've just bought a brand new fridge and they think the fridge is just going to magically just work and just that's it. The way it works is the Nomad is a dumb device, just for not of a better word, but it provides power, 12.6 volt up to 20 amp output. That's what it does. It doesn't say, I don't like that fridge. It says, here's your power. Now, Mr. Fridge, what are you going to do with that power? Again, tutorials on this are available on our YouTube. Through our playlist, you'll be able to look at your fridge and Nomad, how they work together and get the most out of it. So what will happen is that the fridge will have maybe 3 settings. It might have low, medium, and high. It might have an eco setting. It might have a split setting for a fridge freezer. It might have a fridge section. It might have a freezer section. You have to ask yourself, what is that fridge going to draw on the settings that I'm going to have it? Because that's what happens is people say, I won't run the fridge, but they don't tell us what the temperature is, how many times you open the fridge, how long is it running, and what voltage that fridge works with. Because this is very important. If you set the fridge on high, it likes higher voltage. That's why they typically take 12 or 24 volt. They like 24 volt or the 240 with the adapter. So it might like anything down to around 10.6 volt. The Nomad runs down to 8.8 or 9 volts. So you've still got about 30-40% of the battery left when your fridge cuts out. That's not a fault of the Nomad. That's not a fault at all. And it's not a fault of the fridge. It's just the way the fridge is designed to work. Some of the older angles will run right down till the Nomad goes flat and the fridge still works. Most of the new fridges will run down about 10.6 or 11 or cut out at 10.6 and cut back in at 11. You do see on a lot of the forums people complaining about the fridge cutting out 10.6 and say the fridge is no good. That's quite typical. It's a typical fridge operational voltage range. That's how they are supposed to work. So it's up to you to maintain your battery at a voltage level that suits what you're running. It's very, very simple. If that fridge over here, which I've got, is a 50 litre, now I know if I set that at -1 or 2, that in 24 hours at that temperature, it will draw about, it's not a very efficient one, but it'll draw about 1.25, let's say 1.25 amp an hour. So in 24 hours, let's say it's drawn 26 amp. If I've got 80 amp in here available, because it's 80% DOD, if I've got 80 in there, that's going to last me, 3.5 days at that amount of amp pulling out. So that, the difference is also, if you were to put that on -15, so it's running flat out as a freezer, massive difference. That will draw around 3.5 to 4 amp an hour. We'll get a call and say the fridge didn't last, sorry, they'll say the Nomad didn't last a full day. It's not. Let's try that again. So if you've got 3 amp, that's drawing because it's set in the freezer over 24 hours, that's going to be, say, 72 amp draw. That means that this unit's probably only going to last 1 day. There's no fault with the fridge, there's no fault with the Nomad. It's simply that you're drawing that much out of it to capacity. There's no point saying, and this does happen, people say, I thought it would run longer than that. I've got a 90 litre fridge on freezer drawing 7 amp consistently. So 7 amp in 50 degree heat, 7 amp, okay, per hour. If you would, that would last you probably let's say 10 or 11 hours. So it's going to last you half a day if you're not charging a unit. There's nothing wrong with the Nomad. There's nothing wrong with the fridge. It's what you're drawing out of it. So you must read the instructions on your fridge. Really important. The amount of questions we get about fridges, it's not our product, but it's about the fridge. We'll say to you, go back, talk to the manufacturer of the fridge and get the spec as to what the fridge is supposed to be doing. And 99.99% of the time, we know it's just the way that the operational voltage is set. And a lot of times people have it set on high and they just need to set on low. Fridges, you've got to remember, have like battery protection in a lot of cases. You can turn that off or you can change the setting so it'll actually work right through to a lower voltage, say 10.6. It'll cut back in at, say, 11. So they're a standard feature of fridges. There's nothing wrong with your fridges in that respect. You can use the Nomads as well in a way that you could use these here. It's called a step up. If you look at our fridge and Nomad tutorial, we do cover off how to use a step up, which means if your Nomad is going basically down to, say, 9 volt or 10 volt and your fridge won't work, you can use one of these sticky DCs, plug it in here, and then all your fridge will see is 12.6 out the other end. Because at the end of that, what that does, it just takes whatever current's going in, 832 volt, and converts to 12.6 at 5, 10 or 20 amp. That's simply all that they do. So from an accessories perspective, we do have things like all your strip lights, like these. Again, these are about 1300 lumen, 1.5 meters, or 1.2 meters, sorry. It has all the gear and stuff in there, full dog clips, etc. These are good for when you put them under the bonnet of your car, if you work in the car at night, or you can just hang off the trees and do those. So they're available from partner channel. Maybe installed where you are at the moment. So that's the lighting. All these adapters, you've got the Y leads and you've got eyelet to Anderson leads. They're all available as well. If the partners don't have them, you can always get them in for you. We do have splash jackets like these. Splash jackets are not waterproofing the unit. The fact is it's a battery, so batteries always need to be ventilated. So always ventilate your Nomad. Don't put them into steel boxes and try to enclose them and make them watertight. If you're making it watertight, they're going to be close to airtight. You never do that with batteries. They should always be ventilated in any situation. The same as if you're charging from an AC/DC charger to a Nomad or any battery. If you use any charger on any battery at any time, you should never leave batteries unsupervised. It's a standard on every single battery charger. It'll stay on there. Please do not charge when it's unattended. Brackets like these are stainless steel marine grade brackets. So you've got a universal here. You can bend these in or out just to hide them, and they fit beautifully, slide in, and away you go. Then you can have a multiple vehicles. So they're retail about 120 bucks. So they're not expensive accessories. Then you've got the AC/DC chargers, as just shown you, but the DC/DC more importantly, these for charging from the car. This one's a Cigar socket one. So you plug in the Cigar socket, and then it goes to this one's a 5 amp, and it's charged at 5 amp. This one down here is a Anderson. So this has got an Anderson in, okay, DC/DC here, and then it goes to the Nomad regulated charge. So again, we'll harp on about regulated, unregulated. You just have to ask yourself, are they regulated or unregulated charges going into the unit? It will take both, but you just need to understand which port to plug it into. I know it's very, very straightforward. We do have a little notice on here, which is do not charge from outputs. We have people trying to charge from the output, which is not a good thing because it's bypassing its balancing processes internally, or trying to charge it through a Cigar socket or going from normal battery to these. What you don't do is you never charge one of these units, say, with an unregulated solar panel and plug it straight into the red. If you do that, then you're putting an unregulated solar panel at 24 volt up and down. Okay, you will damage the unit. It more likely will shut down, but it can actually damage the unit. You'll get away with it most times, but do not do that under any circumstance. The other thing you do not do is you never plug it into a vehicle directly. You might get an electrician who says, well, dual battery, this is what we'll do. We'll have the power go to the unit when your car's on, and when it's off, it won't. The fact is an alternator can pump out 30, 40, 50 amp. If you connect that directly to the Nomad has a limitation, which is 25 amp. I can tell you that alternator will put out well over 30, 40, 50, 60 amp when you're obviously revving it and doing whatever. You will destroy the unit. You'll destroy the BMS. You won't probably hurt the battery, but you'll completely destroy the BMS, not covered by warranty. This has a memory inside, so if you do an overcharge, for example, when we put it on our testing equipment, we'll be able to say it's been overcharged 5, 6 or 7 times. If you overcharge it, then it's at your peril because we've stated in the instructions, do not exceed the charge rates. The other thing that we say don't do is put your solar panel on and charge from the regulator at the same time and try to cram it as much as you can. You have to remember that these are not an AGM setup. Okay, these are designed to be lightweight, good power, consistent power, which is why the NMC cathode's been used, or the lithium type we use, and it's to give you a nice consistent power, longer periods of time. That's what they're designed for. So if you use it the way it's designed to do, then you'll get years and years out of the product. Okay, if you do abuse it, you won't get 12 months out of it. It's just the way it is. So follow the instructions to a T. There's also a fridge insert in here. It talks about your fridges and what you can expect. And then also at the end of this tutorial is another tutorial on solar panels and what you can expect to pay for a solar panel, which ones are good, is there any benefit of paying a lot more for panels and things like that. So our partners, you'll find in store, they may have their own range of solar panels. Again, if you want to go unregulated, look for something either folding blanket or these here, which are a flexi panel, work great. They only weigh 2 or 3 kilograms. I think they're a lot closer to 2 kilograms, which is great. Some of the older style are very heavy. They're the glass looking ones, fold ups, take up space, but they're also very heavy, which we're trying to keep everything as light as we can. So that's the Nomad PDU. Just as a look, and just to go over it again, these are not battery boxes, do have the battery inside, come with a 12-month warranty. They are NMC lithium, 100 amp hour, a true 100 amp hour. They, again, if you want to look at running really high powered accessories like your induction ovens, plasmas, microwaves, all those things over 1,000 watt, this is not the system for you. You'll need to look at numbers of batteries that are actually in serial, so connected all together. And the thing is, and you have to have your whole setup of BMS and then your inverters and things like that. This will run inverter, no problem. We normally use a pocket inverter 150, but you could run, say, a 300 watt inverter out of the output, and yes, you could run some small stuff. These are great for charging your 12 volt battery packs for all your DeWalt's or your Robies, 18 volts, whatever. These will beautifully charge up. So if you're out camping off grid, got your solar panel there, keep the unit topped up. You have to remember that these units are designed to be cycled. If you're going to sit them in the garage for 6 months and just use them occasionally, that's fine, but you're not getting much out of them. These can be used at home if you're going to retrofit, say, your fresco area. You can run all your DC lighting. How about, you know, all of your DC or your low voltage water pumps that have an adapter on there, or they have adapters to the garden lights. You can get rid of those adapters and transformers, and you can run all your garden lights off the Nomad. You may as well use and get the most out of it. It's what I do. So all my frescoes, my pumps, my lighting, etc., it's all free. And if I'm not out for a drive, I'm at home, you may as well make the most out of the Nomad and use it in the house as well for your recreation, sorry, your fresco or outdoor things. And that just gets you started. And you can convert rooms in your house to DC and have them running off the Nomad if you so choose. So that's the Nomad PDU. Other accessories are, like I said, pocket inverters you'll get. You can see accessories online at nomadpdu.com.au. Power analyzers, which are great, which are these here. And you would have seen one connected to this. That's because when I connect that to my solar panel, I simply can look at this and I can tell you how many amp and volt that's coming out of that panel and going into the Nomad, instead of just connecting it directly and then guessing, because this doesn't tell you how much is going in. You'll see the little red light going on means it's charging, but it could be charging at 1 or 2 amp, or it could be charging at 9 amp. It doesn't tell you that. So Power Analyzer is a really great tool. It's pretty much the same as having a multimeter. You know, multimeters are great from a more of a commercial perspective, but if you're not that savvy with them, then just get one of these. It'll tell you what you need to know, how much is going in. This will tell you. It can also tell you how much is going out, is in power and amp. So that's what these are really great for. So again, look for us online at nomadpdu.com.au. Talk in store to any of our partners. If they don't have any of the gear you've seen here, I think we've covered most of this off. If they haven't got any of that gear in there, then by all means you can send us an email, contact at nomadpdu.com.au. If you want to look at solar panels that we supply, which like these ones here, they'll retail for around $300. We'll cover that off in the next shoot. But the thing is that if they don't have those things in store, we can get them in for you without any issue at all. Then that's nationally across Australia. So again, look, thanks for joining us. That's for an out of the box, just a general overview, give you an idea whether it's something suitable for your needs. And like I said, always ask yourself, what is it you want to do first? And then you build a system to give you what you need. And that's the easiest way to do it. So engineering your planning that way, and then you can see if the Nomad is the right solution for yourself. So thanks for joining us again at Nomad PDU. I'm sure that we'll have further tutorials after this one. Thanks again. Bye. Hello, and thanks for joining us again today. We're going to be talking about solar panels. Been asked a number of times, what do we recommend as far as solar panels go with your Nomad PDU? So we're going to look at that specifically today and try to simplify it for you. Because a Nomad can accept regulated or unregulated solar panels. So if you want to know what we recommend as far as a solar panel goes, you can go with a fully regulated solar panel, which has a solar panel like this, or a folding panel, and so on, with a regulator. And if you're going to plug into the regulated input of the Nomad, which is the red input over here, and the red input, okay, that's for regulated charge, maximum 25 amp. So what you need to do is look at the regulator that's connected or you've got with the solar panel, and it's it should be an Mppt. It might be a PMW or something like that, but if you're going to get a regulator, get an Mppt, better quality regulators. So something like a Victron and that type of brand, very good regulator. Maximum of 25 amp, not even 1 amp more. So that'll accept up to 25 amp regulated. So that's going to cost you maybe $300 or $400 on a regulator plus the panel. I don't see any particular reason you have to spend an extreme amount of money on panels. The Nomad doesn't discriminate between a cheap panel and more expensive panel. As far as it's concerned, if it's getting power in, it's just going to do what it needs to do. So me personally, what I use is an unregulated solar panel. This is my panel here. This is got a Japanese coating on it. These are very, very nice, really thin, about 3 kilograms, I believe, 2 to 3 kilograms, really light. As long as you've got space somewhere that you can put a blanket underneath when you're covering it if you're traveling, and don't bend it any more than 30 degrees. So this one here is a 200 watt unregulated solar panel. So when I say unregulated, it's a solar panel on its own that doesn't have a reg. So this panel here, if you have a look at it, that's the connection. It just comes straight off the panel, okay? And then it's got a connection on the end. So I've cut the original connectors off the panel and I've put an Anderson on here. The reason I've done that is obviously good connection, but I've also set the Nomads up with these adapters. These adapters are available from our partners, so they're eyelets to Anderson, and you're trying to keep the run short. So what we're going to do in this instance is we're going to let the Nomad with an internal Mppt. So the Nomad actually has an Mppt controller inside, so that accepts a straight off panel directly to the Nomad. Maximum 10 amp. So a 200 watt panel or less, nothing more, is typically okay to go into the unregulated inputs of the Nomad, so the red and black poles. Red and black poles, it goes in and it goes into the Mppt controller of the Nomad, and that charges for a lithium charge. We do get a number of questions from people saying, I've already got a panel and I've got a regulator that says do not use for lithium. Now, we don't make solar panels, so we're not familiar with every single panel out there. But again, like I said, if you're unsure about the regulator and it's a 200 watt panel less, just get rid of the regulator and use the Mppt inside the Nomad, because it's a good quality Mppt and you're going to get a max out of it. Now, I know from this solar panel here, and this is what these, again, you would have seen us talk about this, like the power analyzer. I'll connect the power analyzer between the solar panel and the unreg input. So unregulated charge going in, goes into the Mppt, it regulates and then goes to the Nomad and charges it nice and correctly. So what I'm going to do here, now you're not going to get any power from the solar panel because we're inside. So I plug the solar panel into this little power analyzer. You don't have to, but it's just so you understand. And then what will happen is that the analyzer will tell you how much current's coming through. That solar panel, we're putting out about 24 or so volt. Now, on this tutorial, you'll see the spec of this panel, and the max output of this panel is 10 amp. I believe it could possibly get to 11, but I've never seen it. And this is a great panel size panel. If you're running a 50-litre fridge and you've got the solar panel every day, every night the Nomad will be full, and in the morning it'll be about 11.8 volt. It'll be full again the next night. Again. You could do this absolutely every day of the year, which is in fact what I do. So what I've got here is I've got an unregulated solar panel connected to the unregulated solar input, maximum 200 watt panel. This will give me a maximum of 10 amp. So under 10 amp for the inputs here, it's up to you to check it. Don't plug a 400 or 500 watt panel or house panel into the Nomad thinking that it's going to regulate it down. You will get electricians sometimes will tell you that the regulator should regulate it all for you. That's not the case. They all have ratings, maximum 10 amp input. It's up to you to check. You look on the back and it says under 11 amp max, and it's between 8 and 32 volt. This will put out 24 volt in an open circuit, and that's fine because the Mppt in the Nomad will take 8 to 32 volt, which is typically for your solar panel. So even a 24 volt solar panel is okay as long as the amp is less than 10 amp. So that's an unregulated solar panel. So this here, again, retail, to give you an idea, this retail, this is about 1300 by 800 and about 3mm thick. It's about 3 kilograms. This has got a nice coating on it. It hasn't got that glass shiny mono coating you normally on the folding panels. They reflect more, these absorb more. So this means it gives you better efficiencies. So I'm really happy with this here, and it only weighs a couple of kilograms. The big folding ones are quite weighty now, take up space and can weigh 15 to 20 kilos. So this here, you can get them in 150s and 200s. I like the 200, it works fantastic with a 50 litre fridge, cycles every day, very good and efficient. And these will retail for $300. So you've got $300, you don't have to invest in a regulator. You can use the Nomad's reg. So if you've already got the Nomad, you don't really go spend a heap more on the solar panel. You know, people can spend $2,000 on a solar panel and think it's giving them better quality power, but it doesn't discriminate about the power. It's PV from the sun, it converts it, gives it to the Nomad, to the Mppt, and then it charges the unit. So there's no point going to an expense of spending a few $1,000s on a solar panel. You're not going to get any benefit out of it. You might get some more efficiency, but for an extra couple of $1,000 and you get a half an amp more, I don't think it's really worth it in the long term. So again, solar panels, anything under 200 watt, the simple math is under 200 watt. The math shows it should actually put out more than 10 amp, but you'll find that most panels won't. They'll probably max at about 10 or 11 under 200 watt. 120, 150, 180 watt, no problems with the panel. Just use the Nomad's reg inside. Get yourself an eyelet like these. You can get them made up if you wanted to, but we do have them available like this. And you can just connect it up to red and black, then connect it to your solar panel directly and let the Nomad's Mppt internally do that for you. Okay, what you don't want to do with a solar panel. If you have an unregulated solar panel like this here, which is unregulated, you don't plug this unregulated into the regulated input. So a lot of people will plate the solar panel like this and say, well, it's only putting 10 amp, that's rated 25. Not the case. It's unregulated. It's going to have pitches and troughs, and there's nothing regulating the current charge and amp. So if you plug it in there, you're going to damage the Nomad. So do not plug an unregulated solar panel. So an unregulated solar panel is what I've got here, but it doesn't have a regulator on it or connected to it. So solar panel to regulator to Nomad. If it's got a regulator, it goes in here. Solar panel without a regulator, i.e. not regulated, you need to get it regulated. Use the Nomad's Mppt internally. So the solar panels, again, if you wanted to use a 300 watt, 400 watt solar panel, you make sure it has a regulator on it. And you can find a 20 amp Mppt like Victron or 15 amp from Victron, and it will regulate it to 20 amp, plug it in, no problem at all. And if it's got a profile lithium, put it on that. If it doesn't have a lithium profile, you can use gel. However, if it doesn't have a lithium profile and it's only a 200 watt panel or less, I would take that control off and just use the Nomad's Mppt. Now this is all in the actual instructions. Again, we go over this time and time again. There's about 8 pages of instructions. Do cover solar off in here as to what you should and shouldn't do. And again, if you've got the solar panel connected and you've got one of these, you're just running the car so there's free from your Nomad when you're driving. You may have a DC-DC set up, and that's fine. When you get to campsite, you unplug your DC or your DC stops working, then you can just plug your solar panel in like that, nice and easy. So this just makes your job easy, and you can set this up how you like. You may want to strap it down, doesn't really matter. Or if you've got cables directly out of the panel, you can obviously cut and strip them. But I've cut the original connectors off this because they don't really suit the Nomad. But Anderson will suit pretty much anything. But again, that's regulated solar panels, unregulated solar panels. The Nomad doesn't discriminate between expensive or cheap panels. It simply looks at the power that's coming out of it, look at the efficiencies. Again, at the end of this tutorial, you'll see a little a snippet of the back of this panel, which tells you what it's got. But again, size-wise, this is a 200 watt panel. It's really small, 1300 by 800, 3mm thick and about 3 kilo. So good value for money at $300. The 150 watt panel is about $250 from the retail partners. They've got this Japanese coating on there, which gives it much more efficiency. Also 3 years warranty on these. So from a money perspective, value for money, these work really well. These are what I use, and we don't have any problems with them. So that's the solar panel, regulated, i.e. has a regulator, and solar panel without regulator. So with regulated solar panels, make sure that it's maximum of 25 amp with a reg, going to the Nomad's regulated input. If your solar panel is less than 200 or less, and it's unregulated, then just use the Nomad's regulator and save yourself some money. You may as well use the Mppt that's in here. It's not a cheap Mppt, so you may as well use it and direct connect it to the solar panel. But no more than 200 watt, no more than 10 amp. That responsibility is on you. Space it in all parts of our instructions. So that's the solar panels. Solar panels are Nomad PDU, and also what do we recommend? We don't have any particular brands that we'd recommend. Well, these ones here are a home brand, smart home group, designed and company owned in Australia, and these work really well with the Nomad. We've been testing for some time, and we haven't had any problems with it at all. So if you need to get these, you can go through our partner channel and get them from them. If not sure, come through us, and then we'll send it through the partners anyway. So no matter where you are in Australia. So that's solar panels, your Nomad PDU, and what we recommend, and talking about the reg and unreg. So we'll talk again soon. Look for more tutorials. We're going to do an out-of-box one now very shortly with all of our new kit that we've got. So any questions you've got, send it to contact@nomadpdu.com.au, and we will talk again soon. Thank you. Hello and thanks for joining us again at Nomad PDU. Today is probably one of the most important topics, and that's about the relationship of your fridge and the Nomad and how to get the most out of it. Now, we've been over this a number of times previously, but there are a number of ways also now that you can run your fridge and draw everything out of the Nomad. So we're going to cover a couple of those off today. So the first thing I want you to notice is I've got one of these set up now with a Siga DC. This is a 5 amp Siga DC connecting to the car. And I've got it connected to a power source here just for illustration purposes. So you can see it's charging over there at the moment. and this is a 5 amp Siga DC. The fridge I've got over here, I think it's a 50 litre fridge. Now it will run from 10.6 through to 12.6 volt plus. And once it gets below 10.6, as a lot of your fridges will, if you've got your setting on low or eco, economical, so you've got a low, medium and high setting, put it on the lowest setting. You've got to remember the Nomad will run down to under 9 volt, but your fridge might stop at 10.5. Very common question we'll get. Okay, so you got it down to 10.5. For me, it's not a problem, because if I'm off gridding, I'm always cycling my battery every day from a solar panel. So it never gets down under 11.9, 11.8, somewhere around that mark. But if you want to get everything out of the Nomad, you can do this a number of ways. Your fridge runs down and cuts out at 10.6. It's not a Nomad issue. You've still got more than half the power left in the battery. So how do you get more out of it? You can use a pocket inverter like this. You've seen us use these before, and that will turn it to 240 power. So it'll have, and that's a 10 amp one. So you can plug that into your Nomad. Remember that each one of these sockets output is rated at 10 amp, except the Anderson over here, it's rated at 20 amp. So you plug that into your Siga plug, and then you take a 240 adapter for your fridge that you get with your fridge. You plug it in, the fridge thinks it's running on 240, and it's going to give it whatever current needs to run perfectly or until it runs the Nomad flat. So it basically tricks this fridge into thinking, well, it's getting its normal power supply from 240. So you can do that. So now I've got this DC, and a lot of people have picked up the DCs now because of the convenience. You can plug it into your Siga socket and you can charge a unit. But one of the things you also can do with the DC, that's a 5 amp. There's also Siga 10 amp, the 10 amp Siga DC. So it's providing with 10 amp output, that's providing 5 amp output. But the key factor in this is providing a 12.6 voltage to the Nomad from the power source. So what it is, it's basically a power stabilizer or voltage stabilizer, if you want to call it that. It's a charger, but it's basically taking whatever you're getting from over there, and this will take, this is 9 to 36 volt in, and then it gives you 12.6 out. So what you could do, let's leave that plugged in there. I've got a fridge here like I showed you. Now let's just plug it in so it fires up, and let's see how much amp that this fridge draws. So this is warm, it's sitting at 15 degrees now, and once this kicks in, you can see that this only draws about 3 and a bit. So probably 3.5. It might kick up to 4, 4.25. I just know from experience with this fridge, and it might get up to about the 4 amp mark going there. So you're running your fridge quite happy now, and you can see the voltage over here at 11.3. This fridge will cut out at 10.6 and won't re-kick or restart and kick back in until it's over at 11 volt. And that's typical with a number of fridges. So you can plug your inverter in, plug the 240 that came with your fridge, plug it in, and you can run the Nomad dry. But then again, you get a little motor running here and it's going to get warm. Okay, if you want to avoid that, yes you can. So we can use these Siga DCs for also tricking the fridge. So as I said, coming out of here, this is 12.6 going to the Nomad from the charge. So if I pull this out now, just quickly, and I plug it into one of my power analyzers, you would have seen us do this before. So that's actually going to tell me, coming out from the power source to the source here, it's going to tell me that there's 12.6 coming out of this. And that tells me, here we go, so this is 12.6. 12.6 is getting provided at the Anderson. So regardless of what's coming out of the power source, it's going to give me 12.6. It's a stabilizer. So you can take even a 24 volt system, plug into one of these, as long as it's between 9 and 36 volt, it'll convert it to 12.6. So what you can do, if you wanted to, is you can take one of these here. So you've driven to your campsite and you're not going to be using your DC because you're sitting at the campsite. Your car's not running, so you're not using it. You can actually pull this out if you wanted to. Let's just take it out now. So I've just pulled that out and it's not charging. So now I'm going to change this and reconfigure it. So I'm now going to trick the fridge. So it's come down to 2.93, which is the amount of amp going out, 11.2, and that will drop down. Once it gets to 10.6, that fridge will stop. So what I can do, if I want to trick it, pull this out, and what I can do is take my 5 amp or my 10 amp Siga DC, because remember these are rated 10 amp, and this I know never gets over 5 amp. So I know my 5 amp DC Siga is going to provide me with 12.6 at this end. So if I plug that in there right now, like I have, okay, I've got power there, and I'll plug this into to see what's coming out. This says 11.3. I'm going to plug it in here, and hopefully she'll fire up if I get the connection right. There we go. Coming out of this is now 12.6. That's 11.3. So this will quite happily now, if you configure it like this and plug this fridge into it, it will run the Nomad flat. It'll run down to 9 volt, and then it's going to get everything out of the Nomad. And when we look at the fridge that's running, it was only pulling around 3 amp. This is actually quite efficient. If I plug this in now to the fridge, you can see how much amp's going to come out of it, and it's still going to be around the same. It's probably about a 10% conversion, I guess, cost by doing what's called a step up. So this basically is a voltage stabilizer, or DC-DC charge if you want to call it. So it takes whatever you're putting in within its limitations. This is 9 to 36 volt. So you can plug the 9 to 36 volt into one of these here, and out comes 12.6, and depending on the amp rating. So this is a 5 amp one we're using at the moment because, like I said, it's only drawing just over 3 amp. That fridge is warm, it's still sitting at 15 degrees. We just fired it up. So now I could leave this plugged in like this right now and forget about it, and then this fridge is going to happily run because it's getting 12.6. That's all it sees, and it's never going to see anything less than 12.6 until this runs dead, and then it's going to shut down. So you can keep an actual eye on here, and even as it's coming down, it'll get down to 10, 10 and a half. It gets down to 10, 9 and a half. You know, at 9 and a half, 9.2, you're getting close to the end of the battery being flat. So if you've got a 10 amp one of these, which you'd probably use if you are using a, say, 100 litre fridge. So a 100 litre fridge is probably going to draw, I guess, between 7 and 9 amp when it kicks in and starts up first go. So you can plug your Siga DC, the 10 amp one, into your Siga socket, and you're happily going to get 12.6 and 10 amp, because you've got to remember, what is your fridge going to draw in amperage? This is only drawing under 5, so I can use my 5 amp. If that was a 100 litre fridge, then I'd have to use my 10 amp Siga DC. But that's one of the great things about these. You could actually have 2 of these and be running the car at the same time charging, which you can do. So if I was going to charge this while I was running exactly this, I can do that. So let's just plug it in here, and I'll plug this in, and we'll see that there's 3.3 coming out. I'll plug this in over here. And I know that's putting in 5 amps, so the red light's on, it's charging, so it's putting in about 2 amp and it's drawing. So I could actually do that if I wanted to. So just remember, you just look at the input and the output. So these are going to give you 12.6 constant, regardless of what voltage is the other end, down to 9 volt. Once it hits 9 volt, that's it, it's out. So that's probably the preferred and easiest way, as long as you sit down and take your time with your fridge. What does your fridge draw? How many amp does it draw? And your fridge will quite happily run at 12.6. We could do a step up like this to 13.8 or 14.5, but there's no necessity to do that when at 12.6 your fridge is going to run quite happily. So that's the way you can use the Siga DC to charge the unit from your car. When you get to campsite, you can take the Siga DC out of your vehicle, okay, which is one of the beautiful things about the unit. Take the unit out, take the Siga DC out. Now you can use the Siga DC to power your fridge and suck down the Nomad right to flat. Never have to worry about it again. So again, it's not the limitation of the power, because it will run down to 9 volt, but your fridge will have a limitation. Always set it to low or eco, because it's got the low voltage protection on the fridges, on a lot of the fridges that you have. So that's the way you can get around it. You can use an inverter like so, plug your 240 that can come with your fridge, and you can run it like that, and it's going to do the conversion for you. But the conversion on this, it'll actually take more to convert the power on one of these than it will one of these, which is solid state. So that's the Siga DC, and using your Siga DC 5 and 10 amp to run your fridge. If you have one of these in the vehicle and it's permanently sitting in there, the car's running. It doesn't matter what the car's doing. If you've got one of these sitting between the vehicle, the front and back, and the crank, you can plug your fridge directly into one of these, because you know the output is always going to be 12.6 and 10 amp, or is it going to be 5 amp? You can get these in 20 amp. So you could have a 20 amp one of those, but you couldn't plug it into here, but you could have that in your car. You could plug the 20 amp into the Anderson output if you wanted to, and you could do a Anderson to Anderson, one of these, and you could have 20 amp coming from there. But your fridge at 100 litre is not going to draw over 10 amp anyway. So the SIGA 5s and 10s, the 40 litre, 50 litre fridges, you probably get away nice and happily with the 5 amp SIGA DC, use it in the car, and then use it to run the fridge. Just put it between exactly what I've done there. If you've got a power analyzer, you can just to test it, just to see how it is going. And you've got your fridge plugged in, as we do here. Where we got it? So I've got it plugged in. And if I wanted to, I could put this between the fridge and the source of power. It'll tell you exactly what it's doing there is 12.6. You could leave this in if you wanted to. But that's how you use the SIGA DC to run your fridge and draw the Nomad completely flat by using a DC voltage stabilizer or the inverter. That's the two ways you can draw it right down. Or if you are cycling your fridge every day and you're running a say 200 watt solar panel regulated or a 300 watt regulated panel, which you can run, you'll find that your fridge in the morning, the sun comes out and it's just going to cycle every day. So it may not even get under 12. So it doesn't really matter about running it right down if you're in that sort of situation. But we do get a lot of questions. We've had it recently again, where people have got the fridge, it's cutting out at 10.6. How do you get around it? That's all you have to do to get around it. So you basically need to provide that with a quite comfortable, anything over 11, 12 volt, fridge is going to work fine. And these SIGA DCs will give you 12.6 voltage and whatever amp rating it is. So look at what amp your fridge draws, okay, and use the right DC module to do that job. So if you've got any questions, I hope that does help you. It will alleviate all those issues you may have with thinking that that's the unit's not holding charge. It's not the unit, okay, it's the way the fridge works and it's the way its voltages and the range that it works with. So again, thanks for joining us, and take a look at other tutorials on our website, more about fridges there, but this is probably going to be the most relevant for you guys that have got a fridge or bought a Nomad just recently and have run into that issue or the challenge with the fridge. It's not a biggie, and these work perfectly fine. So then again, thanks for joining us, and contact at Nomad PDU if you've got any other questions. Thanks again. Today we're just going to have a bit of a miscellaneous talk about fridges, about expectations of your fridge, given that we're coming into summer, the heat, ambient temperature and all those types of things, how they affect your fridges. So with the fridge, you are going to typically run the fridge as a fridge at about 2 degrees. Normally that's a reasonable amount. Obviously if you're up north, you might put it on 0 to keep it under fridge temperature. But if you're using it as a normal fridge at say 2 degrees or 0 degrees or 4 or 5 degrees, you have to remember that will draw much, much less than if you're running it as a freezer. So if you have an 85 or 90 litre fridge and you're running it at minus 15 degrees, you've got to remember the question that we get mostly is how long will a Nomad run a fridge? It's really how long's a piece of string. How big's the fridge? How often you open it? What is the temperature setting you're going to have it at? Because if it's minus 15 as opposed to 2 degrees, it's a massive difference. Because a 100 litre fridge or somewhere around that mark, if you're running it as a freezer and you're running it in 50 degrees, you might have it in your car, your trailer or whatever, it's going to be running flat out. Now if it's drawing 7 or 8 amp at the fridge and you've got a 100 amp hour Nomad, the 100 amp hour Nomad, 80% DOD, which means you've got around about 80 amp hour. You have a bit more because of the recovery. But if you work out the math involved in this, if your fridge is running at 7 amp consistently because it's running as a freezer, 7 into 80 is how many hours? And that's how many hours you're going to get. So if you're running it at 2 degrees and your fridge works at an average of less than an amp an hour, say 0.75, round it up to 1 amp an hour on average, 1 into 80 is you've got 80 hours. So 80 hours is maybe what, 4 days, 3 days, 3.5 days? You'll probably get 4. That's given it's going to be drawing 1 amp less, but it depends again how many times you open the fridge, whether the fridge is full, whether there's warm food in there, and so on. So it's really important to understand how you're using your fridge and understanding that every setting you put on your fridge will make a difference to the length of the time that you'll run a battery. So we will get questions, people say, I thought it might run a lot longer than that. The math is the math. You can't change that. It's simply how many amp hour you're using at the fridge, okay, into what you've got available. If you're using an AGM, just as an example, if you're using an AGM battery and it'll say 160 amp hour AGM battery, and you're running a fridge, it will have a low voltage setting on there. That 160 amp hour AGM battery is going to run right down. It'll probably cut out when it's used only about 40-45% of the battery and cut out. You've still got plenty left in the battery, but you'll damage the battery go past 50% in general with an AGM. So with the lithium batteries, you don't have to worry about that. You can run this dead flat. It's not an issue. The issue is understanding what your fridge does, and that the fridge, you must understand what amp it uses. There's no point plugging it in and say, how long is my fridge going to run? How many litres is the fridge, how big it is, you know, what type of fridge, how expensive it is, what type of compressor it is, what temperature it's set on, what's the ambient temperature you got it on, is it inside a van, is it outside a van, is it in a cabin, or is it in a camper, it could be in sort of a box tray. I mean, is it in direct sun, or is it not in direct sun? All these things make a difference to how long the fridge will run. It's got nothing to do with the power source. It comes down to you understanding the way that you use your fridge. And then you can work it out mathematically how long your Nomad is going to run, or any battery for that instance. So it comes down to you understanding exactly about your fridge, and not coming back, say, to us and say, oh, the fridge only lasted, ran on the Nomad for 24 hours. And quite common, we'll say, well, were you running as a freezer? Oh yeah, I was running at -15 and I had it out, it was up north, say in the Kimberleys, etc., and it's 50 degrees outside or inside a camper. It's going to run hard, and it might be running on average 5 to 7 amp hour all day. So even if you're running for 12 hours in that heat at 5 to 7 amp at times 12 is going to be what, between 60 and 80 amp. It's pretty much going to be done in 20 hours because overnight it's going to draw less. That's the simple way it works. So it doesn't matter how big the battery is, you're still going to have the same mathematical limitations that you need to understand. So that's how you work out how long will your fridge run on any power source. Understand your fridge. Before you go away camping, what you should do is do a dry run and work out, well, let's fill it up. How long would it last? At what temperature? And then you can work out, well, how much power have I got to put in to a power source to make sure my fridge never runs out. That's the smartest way to do it. Always run a dry run for a week before you go away and understand your fridge. Not so much the Nomad, but understand the fridge and how it draws over what period based on what temperature you're going to be using it and set at. Some fridges have combinations of fridge freezer. That's fine. It just comes down to what is the draw that fridge is going to use, and work it out mathematically, not what you think or you thought or maybe this. It's simply math. Work out what that draws an amp and put it into what available amp hour you have, and that's simply how you work out your fridge. Second thing is, we covered this before, keep the runs, like don't do what I've got here. I've got a super long run here between the power source and the Nomad. You're going to get a voltage drop, and that could be the difference of 3 or 4 hours because it's going to hit the low voltage limitation of your fridge. So again, keep those runs short, and again, do some dry runs on your fridge to understand your fridge. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of fridges out there that all run differently. They all have different parameters. They'll all have different insulation and different compressors. The best thing is you need to test it and to work it out yourself, so you don't leave yourself in the open with, obviously getting your contents of your fridge warm. You want to make sure that you understand that fridge completely. So hopefully that helps you out, gives you a better Christmas. Make sure that you don't have any food that's going to go off because you ran your fridge and not its optimum temperature and also optimum power supply. So thanks again. Talk soon. Bye.